Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I have tips and tricks for Rep Paladins for Mythic Plus in the Uldaman dungeon, the new Uldaman dungeon for Mythic Plus. I don't know that I'm going to do one of these for every single dungeon, but Uldaman in particular has a lot of Retribution Paladin tech, and so I'm going to be going over some of that stuff with you here. I'm going to be going through the whole dungeon. I'll edit out, the stuff that's not important, and we'll talk about the stuff that is important. So let's go to a spec here. As far as your spec goes for this dungeon, you have a lot of choices to make here. Having stun DR is good. Having Unbound Freedom is good. Sack is good. Bop is good. Those are just normally good things, right? They can all come in quite useful here. Obviously, Blinding Light is always just good to have in a dungeon, but in this case, I do not have it. So let's go ahead and get started here. It's mostly going to be bosses. This trash is actually really pretty easy for Rat. I'm on just a normal difficulty here, just to run through it. There is, I'm gonna try to avoid talking about things that are like not rep based, so like just melee based or whatever. Obviously, you want to be throwing your interrupt whenever you can. That's just normal. There is a some cleanse dispel you can do on the trash. It's not hyper important though, so you shouldn't feel pressured to take cleanse for that. It's not super important for the trash, and even if your healer's not dispelling it, it's not like hyper deadly compared to some other things. So we'll go ahead and move over to the dwarves, the first boss. All right, so here we are at the first boss. If you do them in sequential order, it's the Lost Dwarves. For Rep Paladin, there's not a ton to know, but I will go over just a couple things. The number one thing you're watching out for on this fight is Balog. So Balog has two things that you can't really see but can kill you as a melee. So he has a cleave, and he'll randomly turn and aim his gun in a direction. There's a lot of these mechanics like the powder on the first boss in Freehold. So he'll just turn a direction and shoot. So you need to never be in front of Balog, whether it's his cleave or he's turning to shoot his gun. When the ship's going out, obviously in a coordinated group, you kind of want to all stick together and bait the fires. However, if it goes crazy, it's important to note because there is these very large difference in height here. Let's say there's fire all in the middle, and then the boss is like being tanked where Olaf is right now, and there's fire all around. If you've baited up here, you can like horse and jump over the fire, or you can go up that ridge over there, and you can jump down into a safe space as well. So those are some tips I would use for Ret for this boss. Again, mostly just stay out of Balog's way. Everything else is pretty telegraphed, but the Balog one could possibly get you. So we'll head to Bromak next. Alright, so here we're at Bromak, this big trog here. Basically, he summons a totem. Totem does a ton of damage, and he summons ads. The ads can do a good amount of damage too, especially the casters. When it comes to the casters, if you are throwing interrupts on the casters, you're looking to interrupt the chain lightning more than anything else. Obviously, if everyone's interrupting, interrupt whatever you want, but the chain lightning is going to do a lot of damage. He's going to summon a totem. It's really important this totem dies. This week, this is the first week right now, and on Tyrannical, the totem does a ton of damage and can kill your group really, really quickly. So there is some good Rep Paladin utility you can use here. Number one thing would be Blessing of Sacrifice. So we're pretty tanky as Rep Paladins, and we can live through it pretty well with just kind of our natural toolkit, using like Shield of Vengeance and Divine Protection and stuff like that, and using those things. However, and of course Bubble. But when you're going to use your bubble, whatever one you're using your bubble on, you probably should sack somebody too, and you probably want to choose whoever's the most squishy in your party to sack. So, and this would be the boss where if you wanted to reduce the cooldown of your sack and use it more than once, this would probably be the fight to do that as well. One other variation you could do here is, now this would absolutely kill your overall damage, but you could run Execution Sentence without Executioner's Will if you're having a lot of trouble on the totems that come out, because they need to die right away. It's also worth noting for Ret, the totems come out about every 30 seconds, so if you use your wings on pull, you'll have it up for second totem. If you need your damage for the first totem, then you would get the odd totems, first, third, fifth, and stuff like that. But yeah, the biggest thing here is to interrupt when you can, use your sack on whoever is squishy, Preferably, I like to use my bubble with sack when I can, especially in these cases where it's really a lot of damage. And then also, you know, you can also throw a bop out as, or bop. It's actually nature damage, so bop won't help for the totem itself. But yeah, but you can for this, it is pretty much just the sack. Lay on hands, of course. Be ready to use that on somebody that's dipping low too. You have a lot of power to keep people alive as rat right now. So make sure you're using that for this boss, especially on Tyrannical week, unless they tune this to be a lot weaker than what it currently is. So now we're at the third boss here. There wasn't really much to talk about with the trash on the way here. Nothing big for you to do. Just normal stuff, interrupts, stuns. So we're at Sentinel Tronagist here. And the big thing with him is stunning, once again, which is why it's actually good to have your stun DR. And then also for bleeds as well. As a Paladin, you have a lot of power here. Now these bleeds, again, on Tyrannical currently take really, really hard. So what can you do as a ret to make it easier? Well, one, he's going to cast a ability. It's going to put a circle around you. It looks like you might want to spread away from your group, but what you can actually do is you can stack these together if you want. Now, I kind of like more doing like a Venn diagram style, or just putting them in a line really close to each other. But you can actually stack them up if that's what your group wants. Just know that you don't take a damage initially. You drop a swirly, then you run out of it. That's important to note. These circles on the ground stun the boss, and the tank will drag them through it. However, you can use your personal stuns on the boss too, which means like you can use your Hodge, right? And then you can actually stun the boss with your Hodge even. So that's actually a very powerful thing in itself, especially because we have the stun reduction ability with Fist of Justice. So that's an option there. Now the bleeds themselves are very, very strong. They tick very hard. We, however, have things to work against bleeds as Paladins. We first, of course, have our bubble. We'd want to use our bubble to remove a bleed, typically, right? Now, again, we are pretty tanky. We can survive by just popping a personal when we get the bleed. However, you know, if you're out of personals or whatever, you can use your bubble, obviously. You can also take bop and have bop for this. You can bop yourself, you can bop a teammate, whatever, to remove the bleed from them there. You also, again, have your sacrifice. If you don't get the bleed and you want to sacrifice somebody else and use your personal to kind of get through that sacrifice damage, that's an option as well here. And with this, you have tools to extremely mitigate this bleed effect. I'm also a dwarf, so I can use my dwarven racial as well, the dark iron dwarf racial. So you have tons of things there. Again, lay on hands. If they're ticking low from the bleed, lay on hands at the last second. That's obviously good as well. But just tons of ways to mitigate the bleed damage from this boss here. And so extremely valuable. Again, there's just so much Paladin tech for this dungeon. It's actually really, really good. It's worth pointing out on the trash after the bleed boss there that these earthen, these tiny like dwarven type creatures, they can do like a hail of stone, which does quite a lot of damage, and you can stun that or whatever to stop it from happening. It's just a lot of damage currently, and this isn't even fortified week, so I imagine it's going to hurt quite a bit when we get into, you know, like an actual fortified week. For this room, there's these bats. The biggest thing to note with the bats is that they do like a screech that you can interrupt, and that I believe that screech silences everybody. Like it just happened to me there, so that's kind of what you want to be looking to interrupt here. Obviously, this is on normal. I can just kind of run through this without any issues. But in this room, again, if you're looking to interrupt anything, it would be the bat screech. Here we are at the fourth boss. They're actually, with all the ret tech that we've had so far, there's actually not a lot of ret tech here. The biggest thing is just to know that you can run through the fire laser with your bubble. And then I would say also too, for most dungeons, you're probably going to have a build similar to this anyways. But having the extra range here for your single target is really, really good, because if there's a lot of melee on this fight and these embers are moving through, especially like if you had a full melee group, it's really nice to be able to, for the separate ability where there's a red circle around you, it's really nice to be able to hit the boss at range a little bit. And so I would say that's pretty nice little ret tech that you can kind of play ranged on this fight. Other than that, you can run through the laser, and it's just pretty standard. Stay with the group for heals. Stay with the healer in ranged, even though you're melee. But this boss is pretty easy, first of all, and there's not really a ton of ret tech for this boss. On this trash, on your way to the last boss here, so you have these big time reavers here. They're actually going to put a little debuff on you, And what's important to note here, especially on the last pull or for the last boss where there's 2 of them, is here's the debuff. You can actually LOS, like I can't do it right now because I'm tanking it, but you can actually LOS to remove the debuff. So it's like an aura around the little mob here. And you can, I actually just LOS'd it, I think, while he wasn't hitting me. It's actually really easy to do. They don't cast it super often, so you can actually LOS it pretty easy. And here's the 2 pull right here, right before the boss. And some people might pull this whole room together. In a 3-pack, again, you just would want to make sure you LOS if your stacks get too high. For the last boss, once again, we have a little bit of ret tech here. This would be the argument to take Unbound Freedom as a talent for this dungeon. And it's because we're going to be using Blessing of Freedom. Let's open up the adventure log back up. He's going to be using an ability called Time Sync. I believe he puts it on 3 players. And what it does is it does a lot of damage on Tyrannical especially. But it also reduces your movement speed, so we can actually clear it with Blessing of Freedom. The Unbound Freedom would be you put it on somebody else and then it also clears it off of you. Again, just like the other abilities in the dungeon, we're a little bit more tanky as Rat. And so like we could survive by just using a personal if we have to. Obviously, it's always good to use your abilities. You can sack somebody that has it on them. And of course, you can freedom them as well. You cannot freedom every cast quite. I think it's like every 20 seconds technically or something like that. But you can freedom, not freedom, freedom. And then there's like an intermission phase where you stand in the sand to, you know, gain haste or whatever. And then because of that intermission phase, you can actually freedom the 4th as well. So it's kind of like goes back to that rotation of the 1st. So it's kind of like there's only every 2 out of 3 or every 3 out of 4, if you look at it that way. Would it be 3 out of 4? Every 2 out of 3 you can freedom, I would say. It would be the best way to say it. So with Unbound Freedom, if it's on yourself and somebody else, you can actually remove 2 of them by just freeing them. Now, there is a chance that it's not on you, right? There's a 40% chance it's not on you. And so the Unbound Freedom in that case wouldn't help you. And so you just have to make that decision on your own. But it actually is very helpful. Obviously, the normal things as well. You can sack, you can bubble to not take the damage as well. Just important things to note there as far as the damage for that goes. Again, as a Rat, we just have tons of utility when it comes to this. So it is arcane damage, so Bop should not help at all on that. But yeah, this dungeon is super. I ran this on a high key this week just to get a really high one for my vault, and it was a slog, and I had to learn the dungeon very well, and I definitely had to use all of my utility to get through this week on Tyrannical. So I want to make a video helping out anybody else. If you use these tips and tricks as a Ret Paladin, you know, your group will notice, your healer will notice, or your tank will notice, especially, and they'll be like, holy crap, and they'll want to play with you more. So it's very good to know these types of things. Again, I don't know if I'm going to do this for every dungeon, because not every dungeon is this, or Ret is this helpful as this one is. But I might do it for at least a few more or whatever. If there's any specific dungeon you want to hear about, comment below. If I get comments on it, then it's definitely more likely that I would do a video on it. But I definitely wanted to do one for Uldaman here. So that's it for this one. Hopefully these tips and tricks help you out. Hopefully you have good luck in Mythic Plus this season. As always, I ask you to please subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.